You're getting better, Remiara. I can see it in your eyes. Dr. Nathaniel Voss smiled at me across his mahogany desk. 15 years? 15 years of sessions? 15 years of medications? My coffee cup sat untouched. The steam had stopped rising an hour ago. I stared at his face, searching for something I couldn't name. His silver hair caught the afternoon light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Park Avenue office. Everything about him screamed success, trustworthiness, expertise. The diplomas on the wall confirmed it. Yale, Harvard Medical School, board-certified, published researcher. The man had written 3 books on treatment-resistant depression and anxiety disorders. I was his patient. I was beginning to realize, his life's work. The thought arrived like a cold hand on my shoulder. "How are the new medications working?" he asked, making a note on his tablet. He never wrote by hand anymore. Everything went into the digital record, everything documented. "The same," I said. "Better some days, worse on others." "That's expected." He set the tablet down and leaned back in his leather chair. "Your condition is complex, Remiara. Most psychiatrists would have given up by now, but I don't give up on my patients." That phrase, he said it often, "I don't give up on my patients." The problem was, I had been getting better. 3 years ago, I was. Before he adjusted my medications. Before he added the 3rd drug. Then the 4th. Before the new diagnosis. Before he told me I had developed a secondary condition that required additional treatment. I had stopped working as a graphic designer 5 years into seeing him. My anxiety, he said, was too severe. My depression too treatment-resistant. I needed to focus on healing. My ex-husband Marcus had left me 2 years after that, unable to handle what he called the endless cycle of appointments and medications. I didn't blame him. I could barely handle it myself. But I had no one else. No family nearby. No close friends anymore. They had all drifted away over the years, unable to understand why I couldn't just push through or think positive. Dr. Voss was the one constant. The one person who seemed to understand. The one person who never abandoned me. Except now, I was beginning to wonder if he was the reason I never got better. The thought was dangerous, disloyal, ungrateful. Dr. Voss had dedicated his career to helping people like me. People the system had failed. People with conditions that didn't respond to standard treatment. He had published papers about his approach. He had been invited to speak at conferences. His waiting list was 6 months long. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that had been growing for the past 6 months. The small voice that whispered, "What if you're not getting better because he doesn't want you to?" "I want to try something different," I said. The words came out before I could stop them. Dr. Voss's pen paused. "Different how?" "I want to reduce my medications, start tapering off them, see how I feel with less." He was quiet for a long moment, then he set his pen down carefully. "Remiara, we've discussed this before. Your condition is severe. The medications are keeping you stable." "But am I stable, or am I just sedated?" "There's a difference?" "I think so. I used to work. I used to have friends. I used to have a life. Now I take pills 4 times a day and come here twice a week, and that's my entire existence." He stood up and walked to the window. The Manhattan skyline stretched behind him, all glass and steel and ambition. When he turned back, his expression was sad, concerned, like a doctor looking at a patient who was about to make a terrible mistake. "Remiara, I understand your frustration, but if we reduce your medications too quickly, we risk a relapse, a severe one." The last time you tried to adjust your dosage on your own, you ended up in the hospital for 3 weeks. Do you remember that? I did remember. But I also remembered what happened before that. I had been feeling better, clearer. For the first time in months, I had thought about going back to design work. I had started sketching again. Then Dr. Voss had called me in for an emergency session. He had told me my improvement was actually a sign of mania, a new symptom, a new problem. He had increased my medications that day. Within a week, I was back to barely being able to get out of bed. What if that wasn't a relapse? I asked quietly. What if that was actually me getting better, and you made it worse? Dr. Voss returned to his desk. He didn't sit down. Instead, he stood there, looking down at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Remiara, I need to be honest with you. What you're describing sounds like a symptom of your condition. This feeling that your doctor is somehow working against you. This paranoia about your treatment. It's a classic presentation of treatment-resistant depression with paranoid features. The words hit like a slap. Paranoia. There was the diagnosis. There was the box he was putting me in. The moment I questioned him, the moment I suggested that maybe, just maybe, something wasn't right, I became paranoid. Delusional. Sicker than I thought. I'm not paranoid, I said. That's what people with paranoia always say. His voice was gentle, sympathetic. That made it worse somehow. I'm going to add something to your regimen, an antipsychotic. It will help with these intrusive thoughts. I left his office that day with 3 new prescriptions. The medications made me foggy, disconnected. I slept 14 hours a day. When I was awake, I moved through my apartment like a ghost, unable to focus on anything. Television became white noise. Food became something I had to remember to eat. Days blended into nights, blended into days. But that night, sitting in my apartment, I made a decision. I was going to do something I had never done before. I was going to look at my medical records. Dr. Voss kept paper files for all his long-term patients. More secure, he said. Digital records can be hacked. I had signed the release forms years ago, giving him permission to maintain records without electronic backup. I had never questioned it. Why would I? He was my doctor. I trusted him. But I had kept copies of my own medical summaries. Insurance companies sent them. I had a folder full of them, dating back 15 years. I had never really read them. I had just filed them away and trusted that Dr. Voss knew what he was doing. Now, I spread them out on my kitchen table and started reading. The first 5 years of records showed a standard depression diagnosis: major depressive disorder, moderate to severe, appropriate treatment with SSRIs, standard follow-up care. Then, in year 6, something changed. New diagnosis: generalized anxiety disorder with panic features. New medications added. Then year 7, bipolar II disorder suspected. More medications. Year 8, treatment-resistant depression confirmed, antipsychotics added. Year 9, complex PTSD. Year 10, emerging personality disorder traits. Year 11, medication-resistant anxiety with dissociative features. With each passing year, my diagnoses multiplied. With each new diagnosis came new medications. By year 15, I was on 8 different psychiatric drugs. 8. The names were a blur. Sertraline, bupropion, lamictal, abilify, Klonopin, Buspar, hydroxyzine, propranolol. Each one was supposed to target a different symptom. Each one had side effects that required other medications to manage. I did the math. In the first 5 years, I had been on 2 medications. In the last 10 years, I had been on an average of 6. The number of diagnoses had increased proportionally. Each time I got better, Dr. Voss added a new diagnosis. Each new diagnosis required new treatment. Each new treatment kept me from getting better. It was a perfect system, a closed loop. I couldn't leave because I was too sick. I couldn't get better because my sickness was being maintained. And every time I questioned it, the questioning itself became a symptom of my illness. My hands started to shake. Not from the medications this time, from fear, from anger, from the realization that I had spent 15 years of my life trapped in a cage of my own psychiatrist's design. I called my insurance company the next morning. I asked for a complete copy of my medical records going back 15 years. They said it would take 2 weeks. I said I would wait. Those 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I stopped taking the new antipsychotic. I didn't tell Dr. Voss. I just didn't take it. By day 3, my head started to clear. By day 5, I could focus on reading for more than 10 minutes. By day 7, I felt like myself again. The real myself. Not the medicated version, not the patient version. The Remiara who used to design logos and go to dinner with friends and have dreams about the future. When the records arrived, I spent an entire night reading them. Really reading them. Not just skimming, analyzing, cross-referencing. The pattern was undeniable. Every single time I reported improvement, Dr. Voss would find a new symptom to explain why my improvement was actually a sign of a new problem. When I said I was sleeping better, he noted it as possible hypomania. When I said my anxiety was lower, he interpreted it as dissociation or depersonalization. When I said I wanted to go back to work, he diagnosed it as unrealistic thinking and grandiose ideation. I found a note from year 8 that made my stomach turn. It was from a consultation Dr. Voss had with another psychiatrist. The consultant had suggested that my condition might be stabilizing and that we should consider a medication reduction trial. Dr. Voss's response was documented in the record. Patient not ready for reduction. Recommend increasing monitoring and medication compliance assessment. Patient not ready. Not medically not ready. Not clinically not ready. Just not ready. And somehow, after that note, I had developed 3 new symptoms, 3 new diagnoses, 3 new medications. I sat at my kitchen table at 3 a.m. and wept. Not from sadness, from rage, from the understanding that I had been played, systematically, methodically, by a man I had trusted with my entire life. The next morning, I called Dr. Voss's office and canceled my appointment. His secretary tried to convince me to reschedule. Dr. Voss is very concerned about you, she said. He wants to make sure you're okay. I'm fine, I said. I'm not coming back. He won't prescribe your medications without seeing you regularly, she warned. Your prescriptions are tied to your appointments. Of course they were. Another way to keep me coming back. Another way to ensure compliance. Another way to make sure I stayed sick. I called my primary care doctor, Dr. Patricia Huang. I had seen her maybe twice in 15 years, always for physical issues, always with a note from Dr. Voss saying I was psychiatrically unstable and shouldn't be given certain medications. Now I called her and asked for an appointment. I told her I wanted a second psychiatric opinion. She saw me 3 days later. I brought my records. I brought my medication list. I brought the documentation of every new diagnosis Dr. Voss had added over the years. Dr. Huang read through everything carefully. She didn't interrupt me. She didn't try to defend Dr. Voss. She just listened and read and took notes. When she was done, she set the papers down and looked at me over her glasses. Remiara, I'm not a psychiatrist, so I can't give you a formal diagnosis. But I can tell you what I see. I see a patient who was diagnosed with depression and anxiety 15 years ago. Those are treatable conditions. Most people with those conditions get better within a few years. Most people go into remission. Most people get off medications. But you've been on an escalating medication regimen for 15 years, and you've developed more diagnoses with each passing year. That's not a normal treatment trajectory. What do I do? I asked. I'm going to refer you to a psychiatrist I know, Dr. James Chen. He specializes in medication tapering and treatment review for patients on complex regimens. He's not affiliated with Dr. Voss. He won't have any incentive to keep you sick. Let him evaluate you. Get a real second opinion. Dr. Chen's office was in a different building, on a different side of the city. Everything about it felt different. Smaller, less impressive. No mahogany desk, no floor-to-ceiling windows. Just a comfortable office with real furniture and a doctor who actually listened. He spent 2 hours reviewing my records. 2 hours. Dr. Voss usually gave me 50 minutes, and half of that was him talking about his theories. Dr. Chen asked me questions. Real questions. About my life. About my symptoms. About what I wanted. Tell me about the first time you felt depressed, he said. I thought back. 15 years. I had a breakup. My boyfriend of 3 years left me. I was devastated. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I cried all the time. It lasted about 6 months. Then I started to feel better. I went back to work. I went out with friends. I started dating again. And how long were you depressed before you saw Dr. Voss? About 3 months. Then my friend suggested I see someone, and I got an appointment with Dr. Voss. So, you were experiencing normal grief and loss, and you sought treatment for it. That's good. That's appropriate. What happened next? He diagnosed me with major depressive disorder and put me on medication. I started feeling better after a few weeks. I think I probably would have gotten better anyway, but the medication seemed to help, so I kept seeing him. And then I got better. I went back to work. I was doing well. But he said I needed to keep seeing him to make sure I didn't relapse. So, I kept going. And did you relapse? Not really. But he kept saying I needed to stay on the medications. That if I stopped, I would get really sick again. So I stayed on them. But you didn't get sick again? No. I just stayed the same. Never got worse, but never got better either. Just kind of stuck. Dr. Chen leaned back in his chair. Remiara, what you're describing is a normal recovery from depression. You got better. At that point, most psychiatrists would have discussed a medication tapering plan. Most people with your initial presentation would be off medications within a year or two. But instead, Dr. Voss kept you on medications and added new diagnoses. Do you know why? Because I'm sick? I said, but it came out as a question. Or because sick patients need psychiatrists and well patients don't. The words hung in the air between us. I had thought them myself, but hearing them from a real doctor, in a real professional setting, made them feel true in a way they hadn't before. What do I do? I asked. We're going to taper you off these medications. Carefully, slowly, under my supervision. We're going to do it the right way, which means we're going to do it gradually. It will take months. But I think you're going to be surprised by how you feel when you're not chemically restrained. Will I get sick again? Maybe. Some people do experience a recurrence of symptoms during or after tapering, but most don't, and if you do, we'll address it. But we're going to base our treatment decisions on what's actually happening, not on theories about what might happen. We're going to treat you like a person, not a diagnosis. Over the next 8 months, Dr. Chen and I worked together to carefully reduce my medications. Every 2 weeks, we would lower a dose slightly. Every 2 weeks, I would report how I was feeling. Some weeks were hard. Some weeks I experienced anxiety or insomnia or low mood. But each time, instead of adding a new medication, Dr. Chen would wait. We would talk about what was happening. We would adjust the tapering schedule if needed. We would problem solve together. And slowly, week by week, I started to feel like myself again. By month 3, I had cut my medications in half. By month 5, I was down to 1 medication at a low dose. By month 8, I was off everything. I didn't get sick. I didn't relapse. I didn't develop new symptoms. I just got better. 3 months after my last medication, I was sitting at my kitchen table with my laptop, and I did something I hadn't done in 15 years. I opened my design portfolio. I started sketching. Not because Dr. Chen told me to. Not because it was part of a treatment plan. Just because I wanted to. Because I could. Because my brain was finally working again. A week later, I got a call from Dr. Voss's office. His secretary said he was very concerned about me. He hadn't seen me in almost a year. He wanted to schedule an appointment. He said it was urgent. I didn't call back. Instead, I did something I should have done years ago. I filed a complaint with the New York State Department of Health. I detailed my treatment history. I provided copies of my medical records. I described how my diagnoses had multiplied with each passing year. I explained how every improvement had been reframed as a symptom of a new illness. I documented the pattern. The investigation took 6 months. During that time, I continued to get better. I landed my first freelance design project since leaving work. It felt like waking up from a coma. Like remembering who I was. Like coming home to myself. The state's findings were delivered to Dr. Voss in a formal letter. I received a copy. The investigators had found that while Dr. Voss's treatment approach was within the bounds of accepted psychiatric practice, there were concerning patterns in his documentation. Specifically, they noted that his diagnoses had increased in frequency and complexity over time, while his patients' reported functioning had remained relatively stable. They recommended that Dr. Voss undergo additional training in medication management and that his practices be monitored going forward. It wasn't a suspension. It wasn't a revocation of his license. It was barely a slap on the wrist. But it was something. It was documentation. It was a record. And most importantly, it meant that if other patients came forward with similar complaints, there would be a pattern. A history. Evidence. I never heard from Dr. Voss again. Now, sitting in my apartment 2 years later, I looked at the life I had rebuilt. My design business was small, but growing. I had reconnected with old friends. I was dating someone new, someone who knew me as a functional person, not as a patient. I slept 8 hours a night without medication. I woke up clear-headed. I went through my days with energy and purpose. The medication bottles were gone. The appointment cards were gone. The constant underlying anxiety that had been my companion for 15 years was gone. Not because I had learned to manage it better. Not because I had accepted my illness, but because I had never actually been as sick as I was told I was. I thought about all the years I had lost. The career I had abandoned. The relationships I had missed. The life I didn't live because I was too busy being a patient. I thought about the thousands of dollars I had spent on medications and appointments and a doctor who profited from my illness. And I thought about the other patients. The ones still sitting in Dr. Voss's office. The ones still taking 8 medications. The ones still getting new diagnoses every few months. The ones who didn't have a Dr. Patricia Huang to suggest a second opinion. The ones who didn't have the courage or clarity to question their treatment. I wanted to help them. I wanted to warn them. But I also knew how hard it would be to convince someone that their trusted doctor was keeping them sick. I knew because I had lived it. I knew because even now, there was a small voice in my head that whispered, "What if Dr. Chen was wrong? What if you are sick and you're just in denial? What if you relapse and everything falls apart. But I didn't listen to that voice anymore. I had learned to recognize it. It was the voice that Dr. Voss had planted in my head. The voice that kept me compliant. The voice that made me doubt myself. Now, when that voice appeared, I acknowledged it and let it pass. Like a cloud moving across the sky. Like a thought that didn't belong to me. I had been a patient for 15 years. I had been kept sick by the very person who was supposed to make me well. I had lost years of my life to a system designed to profit from my suffering. But I had also learned something invaluable: the power of questioning, the importance of seeking second opinions, the necessity of trusting my own experience over the authority of a white coat and a diploma. If you're in treatment and you're not getting better, ask yourself why. If your diagnoses keep multiplying, question it. If every improvement is reframed as a new symptom, get a second opinion. If your doctor seems more interested in keeping you as a patient than in helping you get well, trust that instinct. Your life depends on it.